Numsa is organizing this special national congress from 13th to 16th December because we have seen through analysis in Numsa NECs, Numsa central committees, that there were quite a number of policy shifts and changes within the ANC and ANC government. When we went to the Numsa 9th National Congress in June 2012 in Durban, many of the things we know now had not occurred. For example, in COSATU, you have a complete paralysis, making the federation almost something that can speak but not do anything about its own resolution.
And grown more desperate in recent months.
We know also that in June of 2012, the South African Communist Party went to its own National Congress, the 13th National Congress. And Numsa came under severe attack for the positions that our NECs would have taken, the positions that our central committees would have taken, and all of those resolutions of Numsa constitutional structures were turned into individual positions as if it belongs to an individual in the person of the Numsa General Secretary. So those are some of the factors, of course, that made us to think very hard about how we respond to this. Of course, one of the national conferences in December 2012 of the African National Congress produced something that we would have never thought would emerge from within the ANC, which was the adoption of the National Development Plan, which Numsa has characterized as a new liberal policy, which is a surrogate of GEAR. So in a sense, when we got to analyze in a special Numsa Central Committee on the 11th of August all of these developments, we came to one conclusion, that we would have to convene a special Congress to discuss and debate these matters.
They're afraid for questions.
The reason the Central Committee took an unprecedented decision to have a special National Congress is because there are a lot of things that have been happening between the last Congress and this Congress that is coming in the country, in the Federation, COSATU, and in the Union itself.
The Congress would be about 1,500 workers coming from across the country, and the Central Committee is about 4 workers per region from the 9 regions. And therefore we felt these issues need to have more brains, and therefore the Special Congress to deal with it. We will be starting from the shop floor in terms of getting the views of workers on how should we respond to these challenges. So we expect workers to be well prepared to help us as a national union to respond to the challenges. How can we build a united COSATU and a united labor movement?
The Numsa Central Committee of 11 August 2013 adopted an agenda, a 6-point agenda for the special Numsa National Congress. The first agenda item deals with the challenges we confront within the alliance. Secondly, deals with the crisis in COSATU and how we reclaim COSATU as an independent and militant federation. Thirdly, what would be Numsa's approach to the 2014 national elections. The next item is how do we shape Numsa as a shield and a spear of workers in the economy. The next item, number 5, is dealing with a Numsa services charter to improve service to members. And the last item would be a feedback to the Congress on Numsa Section 77 application to NEDLAC.
I feel, as a worker, the alliance is failing us. So by this moment, I think we should be reviewing our resolutions that we take, if they are still relevant to the alliance, like in supporting the ANC or in the way we negotiate to get our views across.
We would make the point to the Special National Congress that sometimes we think that we are achieving significant shifts in the direction of the National Democratic Revolution, only to find that we're talking about paper victories, because the agreements within alliance summits are seldom, if not never, translated into government programs and policies. We've had alliance economic summits, we've had alliance summits prior national general elections, and we would have an outcome, only to find that those outcomes there's no political will to implement them. And therefore, we must consider whether the alliance is not simply conveniently convened prior to election.
As Numsa, we successfully argued that for the working class to benefit, for workers to continue to benefit from this democracy, you need a COSATU that is a campaigning COSATU. You need a COSATU that fights against labor brokers. You need a COSATU that fights against e-tolling. You need a COSATU that is able to combine engagement in the boardroom but also engagement in the streets.
COSATU had argued in the 11th National Congress that it wants a Lula moment in South Africa, that it wants a radical second phase of the National Democratic Revolution that would see the fundamental transformation of the South African economy. It has not done a single thing in the past 12 months to respond to that resolution. We've had a very painful experience where in the February 2013 CEC and the May COSATU CEC, there were very serious attempts to pass a vote of no confidence very shortly after the workers had elected its own General Secretary in Zwelinzima Vavi.
What has made matters worse is that where divisions have resulted in physical attacks.
And unfortunately, then another issue came up where it is alleged that the General Secretary, which he also confirmed in public, that there was an alleged relationship between him and one of the staff members. And the people that had always wanted to deal with him then used that as an opportunity to really deal with him.
And at some point, we got a very distinct impression that unless we approach these matters in a matured way, that COSATU was and still is on the brink of a split which would be disastrous, since we have built this organization into what it had become since 1985.
As Numsa, that is going to continue to work very hard to ensure that COSATU continues to be a united federation. In fact, as Numsa, that must work very hard to achieve the founding goal of COSATU of one country, one federation.
think prior to Mangaung, the Central Committee sit down and analyze, and we were having a hope for a Mangaung to come with a radical economical change. But after the December Congress of the ANC, we realized as Numsa Central Committee that ANC in Mangaung adopted the NDP, and the NDP is not in the favor of the working class and the poor. So that's why we are saying it's important for us to go and revive ourselves in terms of the decision that we're taking from our National Congress in Durban.
It feels like the alliance or the parties, SACP or the ANC, is not taking us serious as workers. We are the majority when it comes to supporting them. If we can say workers don't vote for ANC, it would prevent ANC winning the election. So they should be putting us first always when they take their decisions.
When we went to the Numsa June 2012 National Congress, we debated, discussed, and resolved that Numsa, as in the past, since 1994, would continue to support and call on workers to vote for the African National Congress. Little did we know in June 2012 that the ANC would adopt a new liberal program that would not change the ownership and control of the South African economy. And in our view, as we have analyzed the NDP, it is postponing the resolution of poverty, unemployment, and inequality to 2030 because it does not change any of the structural features of the South African economy. But then happened Marikana, where the state basically used the instrument that it has available in the police, for example, to massacre and mow down workers whose only crime was to demand a 12,500 rand living wage. And for us, as we characterize Marikana, the state acted in the interest of mining capital. In other words, not defending workers, but in fact, we think that what the state wanted to show is that going forward, there should be fear amongst workers.
We have seen what has happened to our colleagues in COSATU, the National Union of Mine Workers. It has literally lost a number of members to a new union called AMCU. The same union that is now beginning to try and make inroads into our own sectors.
What it means to make Numsa a shield and a spear is to ensure that workers who are unorganized find a home for their protection against discrimination, against exploitation, against unsafe conditions in the workplace. And we can ill afford for workers to be poorly organized or being unorganized given the brutality of capital in the South African economy. One of the debates that we must take in this Congress is whether the principle of COSATU of one union, one industry, is applicable in a capitalist world order where there's been technological changes, there's been changes in ownership. In other words, if a multinational company or corporation makes business in mining and smelting, manufacturing, why should we not be organized within that group of a company to represent the interest of workers? Because if we focused in one sector, employers always have this need to plead poverty, but as a whole, they would be making huge profits. And this is one discussion we should have. What becomes the role of shop stewards in rendering a service to members? What becomes the role of local, regional, and national office bearers in responding to the need for proper service to be rendered to members? And what become the role of all of our officials in the union, full-time employed, in ensuring that we render an efficient and effective service to members?
Namhlanje silapha sizothetha nani sinizise apha sizokhupha umsindo wethu apha kubaqashi ongxowankulu aba bamfimfitha igazi lenu.
What is it that we must do to achieve the 400,000 members that we said we're going to achieve in the midst of the global financial crisis, but also in the midst of more and more workers starting to raise issues about COSATU unions, maybe not doing what it needs to do in terms of servicing members. And indeed, between 2008 and 2012, we have been a campaigning union. And in fact, even this year, we can count a number of campaigns that we've led successfully. We led the electricity campaign where we managed to convince Numsa not to give a 16% increase to Excom, which is a campaign that really assisted the whole country, not just us, which is a campaign that ensured that many, many companies remain opened in order for our workers and our members to continue to be employed in the midst of unemployment in our country that is continuing to ravage our communities.
As you know, in the Labor Relations Act, trade unions have the possibility to file an application if it wanted to have a socio-economic strike in the economy, which is referred to broadly as a Section 77 application. And Numsa has filed such an application. And among some of the issues that we want a socio-economic strike on is, for example, the nationalization of Sasol, ArcelorMittal. Those companies, as you know, were privatized. They used to be in the hands of the state. And this is what our strike would aim to do for those strategic companies to be returned from private into public hands once more. And everything else that requires the attention to bring a better life for the working class in South Africa.
We know that it is the media's campaign and other people's campaign to project unions as organizations that are doing more political work than the actual work. And as Numsa, we want to go to the owners of this union and really ask a question: do you also see us that way? Because as we've always said since we were formed 26 years ago, workers do not sleep in factories. Workers are members of society, workers are members of their communities, and therefore you cannot divorce worker issues from political issues. So these are all the reasons, or some of the reasons that make us to say, let us go to the Congress. Let the Congress say to us, what is it that we must do to avoid a Numsa that loses members like other COSATU unions are losing members? What is it that we must do to make sure that we are in Numsa that continues to be a united Numsa that continues to grow.
What we want to see out of this Congress taking place on 13 to 16 December 2013 at Birchwood, one is a process, a democratic process that would have unfolded from workplaces in our Numsa locals, in our Numsa regions, where everyone has the possibility to participate and debate the 6 items before Congress. We would want to see, as Numsa National Office Bearers, the outcome to demonstrate that indeed we can confront some of these dynamic and very difficult questions, that we would be able to put forward a raft of proposals and resolutions that will engage with all of the 6 items that we have on the agenda. And in a sense, it would be, coming out with a very clear line of march on a tactical and a strategic level. And finally, we think that this would be a groundbreaking and historical Special National Congress, to the extent that we would not detain ourselves with the sort of historical discussions and perspectives, but that we need to break new ground as we move forward in this terrain of struggle.